Right, so we got. We'll have it as a sort of conversation. So we got Stevie and Nick. Everything is on camera and it will go on the website. Okay, so what I thought to just talk a little bit about your parts, the sort of the relationship, particularly that you two, the two characters, Malheureux and Freevill, have together, and then also talking about sort of rehearsals either together or looking at individual speeches, and we might just want to focus on one. It's up to you guys to think and see what you think. But do you want to start off and say a little bit about how, maybe talk about sort of the arc of your characters? It might be a good start. I mean, where you start as a, and how that changes. So perhaps
look you all down the camera.
If you look to me, because I'm kind of near enough behind the camera. So, Nick, do you want to start us off? Freevill?
Say the question again, please, Ollie.
Okay. Well, how do you think that? How does the character change, or what is the character as he starts, and how does it change? Are there certain turning points within the play, and are there particular scenes, and how in rehearsal did you explore that?
Freevill, from rehearsal to stage, made a vast change. He took a very drastic turn, but not from suddenly one thing to the other, but he certainly moulded into something much different than when we started, which I think is always warranted and always expected. But I don't think any of us, talking to Mike, talking to Stevie, I don't think we ever expected him to become the character that he did, actually, in the end, until there was a certain point where we actually went, how I was relaxing into the character, and how his relationship with Malheureux, I think especially, really started to develop. We realised that he was becoming something that we didn't foresee at the start. As the play, concerning the play, he certainly, you start off seeing him as, the obvious things you see are sort of the leader of the pack, very confident, on the verge of arrogance, but fun, and actually certainly a joker. That turns when I would think the stakes basically of the play actually rise. Instead of just being jokes outside a tavern, it actually turns into a life and death situation for certain characters, and therefore you actually see what these characters are made of.
A much darker side to Freevill.
Yeah, a much darker side, and that was the change that we really found, was after sort of talking to Mike, after really thinking about the character myself, after reading certain things about him, I always felt there was a few ways you could go with it, and there are quite polar opinions on him. One being the moral compass of the play, the other being actually basically the devil. And to be honest, the latter is what we sort of erred towards, really.
I think that's proved by the end of the play. Freevill is atrocious throughout, has some very dark thoughts throughout. To see how mourned one's life when you're dead, things like that.
Grief
and I think
endears love. It's just
exactly,
sadistic thoughts, which I've found very enjoyable to play. Maybe that says something about me, but no, it's been a very fun process, and being able to mould the character in that way for myself has been fantastic.
I think a change we made towards the end of the process as well was the final moment, which I think needed a certain amount of catharsis. Personally, definitely, because he's Malheureuxs put through the grinder, and I think the fact that Freevill's left on his own by the end is actually a really nice touch, because I think the text can infer either reading. Yeah. So I think personally I was glad that Freevill was left on his own at the end.
No, and it's if you look at the moral of the play, I think it's something that you certainly. It didn't only just need more gravitas as a scene; it needed something to happen to characters, as whether mercy or fate or vengeance or whatever, but something to happen. And I've been with Mike been talking about relevant characters who you could sort of draw upon, as in Iago's, or we really picked on Coriolanus for that part, where with the famous line "I banish you," with Coriolanus basically just saying he's when society banishes him, he banishes them, and it's something we really looked at, and I found very interesting to have this completely different ending, which none of us would have expected at the start.
Just something about, I mean, Nick, you're right, but Freevill has been portrayed either as this sort of moral compass or slightly devil, but divided. But everyone seems to be absolutely certain that Malheureux is the strict Puritan, sort of, and that wasn't.
I think
what came out from your performance and from the development. So do you want to? Is that how you went into it, or how did that change?
Yeah, I mean, auditioning. You know, we sort of looked searching on Wikipedia or whatever. I must admit, but you know, you see readings of Malheureux as a sort of Puritan that has this huge reversal, and he is the person in the play that has the biggest moral reversal. But I think it is often played too much, and the few opportunities we've seen of other performances, you know, he's all in black, collars, sort of standard Puritan, and it just seems a bit unrealistic. I mean, I think especially at the start with all the sort of banter with the 4 blokes at the start, it's really lovely, and Malheureux joins in, to be honest, and I think, you know, he changes within one scene. It doesn't take much to tempt him, really. It's just his Freevill just saying, "Oh, go on, go on, go on," and so he does. He says he goes to make her loathe the shame she's in, but ultimately, you know, I think he's tempted from the start, and to not have that there makes it actually really quite difficult as an actor to do that sudden switch. So I think planting it a bit earlier on made it a lot easier for me to have this huge reversal.
I think, well, just from, you know, looking over, and obviously because we were in a lot of rehearsals together, and just seeing both
every
the
rehearsal.
developments, every rehearsal, it always seemed to me too easy. You know, just to have the Puritan, you know, black and white. You know, characters are more complicated than that, and I think that's something that, you know, Stevie obviously and Mike and, you know, obviously saw straight from the offset.
And I think you'd be in danger of making it far too comic as well if you went from Puritan to suddenly in love with a prostitute. That's a naturally funny situation.
Well, it's just much more farcical, really, than
also
something great real character.
Difficult to sustain as well.
Yeah.
That's a single gag. Where if you've got it, we got it. Is there early on there is a series of speeches, particularly from Malheureux, soliloquies which aren't really soliloquies because they're being overheard, which breaking that kind of rule of, which is it wasn't until I sat down and watched the whole thing through the direct rehearsal, then saw the same. I mean, I've been in rehearsal when you've been sort of sneaking and listening behind, and seeing it one after the other. But in that content of those soliloquies, they're very difficult ones, and they seem to have it changes. You move all over the place with it, which is precisely why possibly you can't have Malheureux as a just strict Puritan. He moves all over. Can you sort of take us through one of those and say how your approach? I mean, how you found working on that, the kind of challenges it posed, the detail that you had to go to, and how that helped structure your interpretation of character throughout going on into the play.
I think the darkest moment for Malheureux, or one of a few dark moments, is scene 6, which we actually made into one scene, which is the one soliloquy where he's not overheard. Just thinking about having to kill my friend, tis to kill myself, and I think I can really sympathise with Malheureux there, but he also just has some quite dark thoughts. But he changes throughout this soliloquy, and I think the line "think more" is sort of a gift to an actor, because that's just a moment where he needs to stop being quite so passionate, stop living spontaneously, which he's never done before, by all accounts, and sort of just take a breath and think about it. And to be able to sort of convey this to an audience and actually sort of work with an audience, explaining them, was a really nice moment, and thankfully wasn't overheard by Freevill.
So both of you have speeches where you have a lot of material to get through, but there are key points and plot points that you need to get across to the audience. And what quite often happens in this sort of work on this sort of material is that people see this huge, long piece which they just have to get through. So you're just always going towards the end and trying to get it finished. How did you work in rehearsal to really try and convey what was important, and how did you decide what was important? Is that something that you spent a lot of time doing?
I think every line is vital, and every line induces some sort of change in the character. You know, these are men that think very precisely. They're vastly intellectual and can pretty much argue any point. So you've got to work out which points, specifically for Freevill, they're being honest, and at which points they're just bandying about arguments for the sake of a good debate or playing devil's advocate.
It's I can't speak for you, but you know, Freevill is much cleverer than I am, as just as a person. So and the way he chops and changes from different thought to different idea to different emotion was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge, but also, as Stevie says, well, it's a gift for an actor, just because
you can just have fun with it.
You can have I think that was one of the most important things. I think for me was actually just having fun with it. If you look at it as just a piece of text you have to read and get through, then you know you're not going to get anywhere, and you don't keep the audience with you. And I think that was something that was really important for, I think, both my character and yours, with those sort of longer soliloquies where you're going, like, my personal opinion is the audience are the prerogative. They are the ones, their enjoyment, that has got to be the main priority. And if you're not keeping them,
understand.
Well, yeah, exactly. And understanding breeds enjoyment. So if you've got them yawning or coughing, then you've lost the game. So keeping them on, not on tenterhooks, not waiting for everything, because you know that height of emotion is just not possible 100% of the time. But always keeping them intrigued and involved with what you're doing, I think, was the main point.
Great. I know you guys want to get away, so it's been a long day, long week. So let's stop there. And
Fantastic.